It had been a long drive for Emily Stanton, and she was starting to feel the weight of the journey. The rhythmic hum of her car's engine had been her only companion for hours, and the occasional blinks of highway lights had become a monotonous pattern in her peripheral vision. Emily wasn't one to complain, though. She preferred the solitude of the open road, where she could think, breathe, and leave everything else behind. She pulled into a quiet gas station, the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked while driving past. The neon sign flickered slightly, casting an uneven glow over the lot. Her car rolled to a stop by one of the pumps, its sleek silver body catching the faint light. It wasn't a flashy car, not the kind that turned heads for its price tag. But to Emily, it was perfect. The engine was finely tuned, the tires chosen with care, and every detail spoke of performance rather than showmanship. Emily stepped out, her jeans and hoodie blending her into the quiet scenery. She looked like any other traveler stopping for fuel. To the casual observer, she might have seemed tired, even a little out of place, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. But Emily wasn't just another traveler. Beneath the unassuming exterior was a woman who had spent years mastering a craft that very few could truly understand. And tonight, though she didn't know it yet, she would need every ounce of that skill. The station was mostly empty. A single clerk sat behind the glass counter inside, absorbed in his phone, barely glancing up as Emily swiped her card and began to fill her tank. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and asphalt. Emily's mind wandered as she stared at the numbers climbing on the pump. This wasn't a stop she had planned, it was simply a necessity. But something about the stillness of the night felt heavy, as if the universe were holding its breath. Just as she replaced the pump nozzle and reached for her receipt, the quiet was broken by a low rumble. It started faintly, like distant thunder, and grew louder with each passing second. Emily turned her head, her hand still resting on the pump. 3 motorcycles roared into the station, their engines cutting through the stillness like knives. The riders slowed as they approached, their headlights casting long, eerie shadows on the pavement. They parked in a line, their bikes gleaming under the flickering neon sign. The riders dismounted, each one removing their helmet to reveal faces marked by cocky grins and eyes that seemed to take in everything around them, especially Emily. She could feel their gazes settle on her, sizing her up, as if she were an object of curiosity or amusement. The tallest of the group, a man with a thick leather jacket and a swagger that matched the roar of his bike, was the first to speak. Well, what do we have here?" he said, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. "A little late for a lady to be out here alone, isn't it?" Emily didn't respond immediately. She met his gaze briefly, her face calm, before turning back to close the gas cap on her car. She had dealt with men like this before, loud, overconfident, and often looking for trouble. Her instinct was to avoid confrontation, but something told her that tonight, avoidance might not be an option. "Nice car," another rider chimed in, leaning against his bike with a smirk. "Bet it's more about looks than performance, though. You know, like a trophy on wheels." The group chuckled, their laughter echoing in the empty lot. Emily's hand paused on the door handle. She took a slow breath, her fingers tightening slightly. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Still, she had no intention of giving them the reaction they seemed to be fishing for. Instead, she opened the door and slipped into the driver's seat, her movements steady and deliberate. But the bikers weren't done. The tallest one stepped closer, his boots clinking against the pavement. "Hey, don't rush off," he said, his tone still laced with mockery. "We're just trying to be friendly. Right, boys?" The others nodded, their grins widening. Emily's car's interior was a stark contrast to her unassuming appearance. The dashboard was custom fitted with high-performance gauges, and the faint glow of LED lights illuminated the precision of the controls. As she sat there, she couldn't help but feel the familiar tingle of anticipation. It was the same feeling she got every time she stepped onto a track or lined up at the starting line. Her car wasn't just a vehicle, it was an extension of her, a testament to the countless hours she had spent honing her skills. "Kman, sweetheart," another biker called out. "Why don't you show us what that thing can do? Or are you afraid you'll embarrass yourself?" Emily glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were calm, but there was a spark of something else, determination, perhaps, or the faintest hint of amusement. She wasn't angry. If anything, she felt a quiet sense of resolve. They didn't know her, and they certainly didn't know what she was capable of. But they were about to find out. Outside, the bikers were growing bolder. One of them walked around to the front of her car, peering at the hood as if inspecting it. "It's cute," he said loudly, making sure she could hear. "But I bet it couldn't keep up with us for 5 minutes." Emily's fingers brushed the key in the ignition. She wasn't someone who sought out conflict, but she also wasn't someone who backed down from it. Years of racing had taught her the value of patience, waiting for the right moment to make a move. She wasn't going to let them goad her into acting rashly. Instead, she let the moment stretch, the silence between their taunts growing longer. The tallest biker finally stepped back, crossing his arms and tilting his head. "You're not much of a talker, are you?" he said, his tone almost challenging. "That's fine. Actions speak louder than words, anyway." Emily finally looked up, her gaze meeting his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt charged, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Then, without a word, she turned the key. The engine came to life with a low, powerful growl that seemed to echo in the stillness of the night. The bikers exchanged glances, their cocky expressions faltering slightly. This wasn't the sound of an ordinary car engine. There was something precise, almost predatory, about it. Emily shifted into gear, her movements smooth and deliberate. She didn't need to say anything. The message was clear: if they wanted a challenge, she was ready. As the car rolled forward slightly, the bikers scrambled to their bikes, their laughter now tinged with nervous energy. They weren't sure what to make of her, but they weren't about to back down. The tallest one revved his engine, the roar filling the night air. "All right, let's see what you've got," he called out, his voice carrying both excitement and uncertainty. Emily's lips curved into a faint smile as she adjusted her grip on the steering wheel. Tonight had been just another stop on her journey until now. Now, it was something else entirely. She wasn't just filling up her tank, she was about to remind herself, and everyone else, why she belonged behind the wheel of a car built for speed. The quiet night was gone, replaced by the growl of engines and the charged anticipation of what was to come. Emily glanced at the road ahead, her mind already calculating angles, speeds, and strategies. She wasn't just driving, she was preparing for the kind of battle she knew best. And as the bikers revved their engines beside her, she couldn't help but think, they had no idea what they were in for. As the engines roared and the bikers lined up beside her, the once quiet gas station transformed into an impromptu arena. Emily's heartbeat was steady, her focus razor sharp. She had been in situations far more intense than this, but something about the unpredictability of the night made her grip the wheel a little tighter. The tallest biker, clearly the self-proclaimed leader, leaned forward on his handlebars. "Here's the deal," he said, his voice carrying over the rumble of the bikes. "First one to the old diner a few miles down wins. No rules, no limits. If you're game, let's see if that fancy car can keep up." Emily didn't respond with words. Instead, she revved her engine, the sound cutting through the air with a guttural growl that sent shivers down the bikers' spines. It was a sound they hadn't expected from her car, a machine they had dismissed as just another pretty toy. Their smirks wavered, but they quickly masked their surprise with bravado. "All right, lady," one of the younger bikers taunted. Don't say we didn't warn you when you can't keep up. The leader raised his hand, signaling the start. On my count. 3, 2. Emily's gaze locked on the road ahead. She could feel the power of her car beneath her, like a caged beast waiting to be unleashed. She inhaled deeply, letting the thrill of the moment wash over her. 1. Go. The bikers shot forward, their motorcycles roaring like wild animals. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second before slamming her foot on the gas. The tires screeched against the pavement, and her car surged forward with a force that pinned her back against the seat. The bikers' laughter, faintly audible through the engines, quickly faded as her car closed the gap between them with unnerving speed. Within moments, Emily had caught up to the pack. The youngest biker glanced over his shoulder, his eyes widening in disbelief. "No way," he muttered, twisting the throttle to push his bike harder. But it was no use. Emily's car moved with a fluidity and precision that defied their expectations. She weaved through the group, her car gliding effortlessly past the roaring motorcycles. The road ahead stretched out like a ribbon under the moonlight, and Emily's mind worked like a finely tuned machine. Every curve, every incline, every patch of uneven asphalt, she saw it all, calculated it all, and adjusted her movements accordingly. The leader, now in second place, clenched his jaw as he watched her tail lights pull ahead. He hadn't expected this, none of them had. "She's fast," he growled, his grip tightening on the handlebars. "But let's see how she handles this." The road ahead narrowed, bordered by thick rows of trees. It was the kind of stretch that demanded absolute focus, where a single mistake could send a driver careening off the pavement. The leader accelerated, his bike roaring as he closed the distance between himself and Emily's car. Emily noticed him in her rearview mirror. A slight smile tugged at her lips. He thought he could intimidate her, pressure her into making a mistake. But what he didn't know was that this was her element. She thrived under pressure. She shifted gears, the car responding instantly to her command. The narrow road required precision, and Emily delivered it in spades. Her car hugged the curves with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, her tires skimming the edge of the asphalt without faltering. The leader, struggling to keep up, pushed his bike harder. But as the road twisted and turned, his overconfidence began to betray him. His bike wobbled slightly on a sharp curve, forcing him to ease up just enough for Emily to widen the gap. Behind them, the rest of the bikers were in disarray. One of them, frustrated by his inability to catch up, veered too close to the edge of the road and nearly lost control. He managed to recover, but his confidence was shaken. Emily, meanwhile, was in her zone. The world outside the car blurred into a series of fleeting images: trees rushing past, the faint glow of the moon, and the road that seemed to stretch endlessly before her. She didn't need to look at the speedometer to know she was pushing the limits of her car. She could feel it in every fiber of her being. As the old diner came into view, its weathered sign illuminated by a single flickering light, Emily allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. She eased off the gas, letting the car glide smoothly into the makeshift finish line. Behind her, the leader's bike roared in frustration as he crossed the line several seconds later, his pride visibly bruised. The other bikers trickled in one by one, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright embarrassment. The leader dismounted his bike, pulling off his helmet and running a hand through his hair. He approached Emily's car, his cocky demeanor replaced by something more subdued. Emily stepped out of the car, her movements calm and deliberate. She didn't gloat or mock them. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. "Well," the leader said, his voice lacking the bravado it had carried earlier. "I guess we underestimated you." Emily met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't judge a driver by her car," she said simply, her tone steady. The leader nodded slowly, a hint of respect creeping into his expression. "Fair enough. As the bikers regrouped, their laughter more subdued and their egos visibly deflated, Emily climbed back into her car. The night was quiet again, the roar of engines replaced by the soft hum of the diner's neon sign. Emily started the engine, its low growl a reminder of the power that lay beneath its unassuming exterior. As she pulled away from the diner, the road stretched out before her once more. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep sense of satisfaction. Tonight had been unexpected, but it had reminded her of something important. No matter how much people underestimated her, she always had the ability to prove them wrong. And as the miles rolled by, Emily couldn't help but smile. The open road was hers again, and with it came the endless possibilities of what lay ahead. The quiet of the gas station shattered as 3 motorcycles rolled into the lot, their engines snarling like a pack of wolves. Their headlights sliced through the dim glow of the flickering neon sign, illuminating the empty space as if claiming it. Emily barely glanced up, her focus remaining on the gas pump as she filled her car's tank. The riders dismounted one by one, boots clinking against the pavement. Their movements were confident, almost rehearsed, like men used to commanding attention wherever they went. They shed their helmets with a casual flair, revealing faces marked by smirks that carried equal parts arrogance and amusement. The leader, a tall man with a leather jacket adorned with patches and studs, flicked his gaze toward Emily's car before turning his full attention to her. Well, he drawled, his voice carrying easily in the still night. What do we have here? A lady all alone with her shiny little car. Don't see that every day. Emily didn't react. She finished pumping the gas and carefully replaced the nozzle, her movements measured and deliberate. She'd encountered men like this before, swaggering, loud, and hungry for attention. Their bark was often worse than their bite, but they were unpredictable, and she knew better than to give them the reaction they were fishing for. The second biker, shorter but stockier, leaned against his bike, crossing his arms as his eyes roamed over her car. Nice ride, he said, his tone laced with mockery. Bet it looks fast, but I'd put money on it being all show and no go. Probably couldn't keep up with a scooter. The third rider, younger and sporting a cocky grin, chimed in. Think she even knows what's under the hood? Or is it just Daddy's car she borrowed for the weekend? Laughter erupted from the group, a sharp, grating sound that bounced off the empty station walls. Emily exhaled quietly, her fingers tightening on the car door handle. She had no intention of engaging them, but their jeering was impossible to ignore. The leader took a step closer, his boots crunching against the gravel. Hey, sweetheart, he said, his voice dropping into a mockingly friendly tone. You okay? You look a little lost. Maybe we can give you some directions unless you're afraid to talk to us. Emily finally turned to face them, her expression calm but firm. Her steady gaze met the leader's, and for a brief moment, the smirk on his face wavered. There was something in her eyes, something unflinching that gave him pause. But the moment passed quickly, and his grin returned, wider than before. Oh, she's got some fire, he said, glancing back at his friends. What do you think, boys? Should we see what that car can really do? Or is it just another pretty thing on the road? The younger biker laughed, pushing off his bike and taking a step forward. I say we give her a chance. You know, let her prove us wrong. Though I doubt she's got the guts. Emily's jaw tightened slightly, but she remained silent. She wasn't angry, at least not yet. If anything, she felt a simmering sense of resolve. They didn't know her, and they certainly didn't know what her car was capable of. Years of racing had taught her the value of patience, of waiting for the right moment to make her move. She wasn't going to let their taunts rattle her. The leader gestured toward her car, his voice taking on a mocking edge. Come on, sweetheart. Start it up. Let's hear what you've got under that hood. Unless you're scared. Emily finally moved, her hand reaching for the keys. The car roared to life with a sound that silenced the bikers' laughter. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of a flashy sports car or the lazy rumble of a showpiece. It was something deeper, more controlled, a growl that spoke of raw power and precision. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering for the first time. "Whoa," the younger rider muttered, his grin faltering. "That doesn't sound stock." The leader recovered quickly, masking his surprise with a laugh. "All right, you've got a fancy engine. Big deal. Let's see if you know how to use it." Emily shifted into gear, her grip on the steering wheel steady. She didn't look at them as her car rolled forward, the headlights slicing through the night. But she didn't leave, either. Instead, she stopped at the edge of the lot, the engine idling like a predator waiting for its chance to strike. The leader revved his bike, the engine roaring in challenge. "You want to play, lady? Fine. Let's make it interesting. First one to the old diner wins. No rules, no limits. Unless you're afraid you'll lose." Emily's lips curved into a faint smile, not of amusement, but of determination. She had no intention of letting them walk away with the last word. Slowly, she nodded, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. She wasn't just accepting their challenge, she was preparing to leave them in the dust. The bikers cheered, their bravado returning in full force. They mounted their bikes, engines roaring in unison, the sound filling the night air. The leader raised his hand, signaling the start. "On my count. 3, 2. Emily's heart beat steady and strong, her mind already calculating the turns and inclines of the road ahead. She could feel the power of her car beneath her, a perfect machine tuned for moments like this. The bikers thought they were in control, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. 1. Go. The motorcycles shot forward, their tires kicking up gravel as they surged onto the highway. For a moment, Emily let them take the lead, watching as their tail lights danced in the distance. Then, with a smooth press of the accelerator, she unleashed the full power of her car. The engine roared, and the vehicle surged forward with a force that pinned her back against the seat. The road stretched out before her, dark and winding, but Emily saw it as clearly as a racetrack. She wasn't just driving, she was racing, every movement precise and calculated. The bikers had underestimated her, and now, they were about to learn the truth. The tires gripped the asphalt as Emily accelerated, the headlights casting long beams that sliced through the night. She shifted gears effortlessly, her hands steady on the wheel. The bikers had gained a head start, but they didn't realize how quickly that lead would vanish. The highway stretched before her, a ribbon of black cutting through the empty landscape. The first curve loomed ahead, sharp and unforgiving, but Emily didn't falter. She approached it with precision, her car hugging the inside line as if it were glued to the road. Her foot pressed gently on the brake, then immediately back to the accelerator, propelling her out of the turn with smooth, practiced ease. Ahead, the bikers were clustered tightly, their engines growling as they pushed their machines harder. The leader glanced over his shoulder, his expression shifting from cocky confidence to something closer to disbelief. "She's catching up," the younger rider shouted, his voice barely audible over the wind and engine noise. "No way," the stocky one replied, twisting the throttle. His bike surged forward, but the gap between them and Emily was shrinking with every second. Emily's car ate up the distance like a predator closing in on its prey. The engine roared with power, each shift of the gears sending a jolt of speed through the vehicle. She could feel the rhythm of the race in her bones, the ebb and flow of acceleration and control, the split-second decisions that made all the difference. The second curve approached, tighter than the first, and the bikers struggled to navigate it. Their bikes wobbled slightly as they leaned into the turn, tires screeching against the pavement. Emily, on the other hand, handled it like a professional. She braked at the perfect moment, her car gliding through the curve with the grace of a dancer. As she exited the turn, She was right behind the stocky rider. He glanced back, his eyes wide with shock. "No way," he yelled, his voice tinged with panic. Emily didn't need to respond. Her focus was absolute, her hands steady on the wheel as she overtook him on the inside. The roar of her engine drowned out his protests, leaving him in her wake as she surged ahead. The leader, still clinging to his diminishing lead, clenched his jaw. He twisted the throttle to its limit, his bike roaring as it fought for every ounce of speed. But no matter how hard he pushed, he couldn't shake her. "She's crazy," he shouted to the younger rider, who was struggling to keep up. "She's good," the younger rider corrected, his voice tinged with reluctant respect. The road ahead split into two paths, a straight away to the left and a narrower, winding route to the right. The leader veered left, banking on sheer speed to carry him to the finish. The younger rider followed, but Emily made a split-second decision. She took the right path, her tires screeching as she veered onto the winding road. The narrow path tested every ounce of her skill. It was filled with sharp turns and sudden drops, but Emily was in her element. Her car hugged the curves with precision, her hands and feet working in perfect harmony. She could feel the power of the engine beneath her, a steady pulse that matched her own heartbeat. The bikers, meanwhile, struggled on the straightaway. The leader's bike wobbled as he hit a rough patch, and the younger rider had to slow down to avoid losing control. "She's gone," the younger rider muttered, his voice barely audible over the roar of his engine. "No, she's not," the leader barked, his eyes scanning the road ahead. But Emily wasn't gone. She was ahead of them now, her car bursting out of the winding path and onto the final stretch of highway. The diner loomed in the distance, its neon sign glowing faintly against the dark sky. The leader saw her first, his jaw tightening as he realized what had happened. "How?" The younger rider shook his head, his expression a mix of frustration and awe. "She's already there." Emily's car roared past the finish line, the headlights illuminating the empty parking lot of the diner. She eased off the accelerator, the engine purring as she brought the car to a smooth stop. Behind her, the bikers slowed to a crawl, their bikes sputtering as they pulled into the lot. The leader dismounted first, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, marching toward her. "Nobody drives like that." Emily stepped out of her car, her expression calm but firm. She didn't say anything at first, letting the silence stretch as she met his gaze. The leader faltered, his bravado crumbling under her steady stare. "I told you," she said finally, her voice quiet but filled with an unshakable confidence. "You don't know what I'm capable of." The younger rider approached, his cocky grin replaced by something softer. "You're good," he admitted, nodding slightly. "Really good." The stocky rider, still catching his breath, shook his head. "That car isn't just fast, it's a beast. And so are you." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need their validation or their approval. She had proven herself not to them, but to herself. The leader hesitated, his hands clenching and unclenching as he struggled to find the right words. Finally, he muttered, "All right. You win." Emily's lips curved into a faint smile as she climbed back into her car. The engine growled as she started it up, the sound a final reminder of her dominance. She didn't look back as she pulled out of the lot, leaving the bikers to stand in her dust. The road stretched out before her once more, dark and endless, but Emily felt lighter now. She had faced the challenge, and she had come out on top. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The bikers encircled her car like a pack of wolves testing their prey. Their boots echoed against the pavement, the sound blending with the faint hum of the neon lights overhead. One of them, a wiry man with a tattoo snaking up his neck, leaned in closer, his fingers grazing the edge of the hood. "Not bad," he muttered, his tone laced with feigned approval. "But looks can be deceiving," can't they? The tallest biker, the leader of the group, crouched slightly, peering into the windshield with a smirk that revealed too many teeth. You know, he began, his voice slow and deliberate, it's not just about the car. It's about the driver. And I'm not sure you've got the guts for this kind of power. Emily remained still, her hands resting on her lap. Her gaze followed their movements, calculating but calm. She wasn't the kind to be rattled by bravado, and certainly not by these amateur games. In her mind, a different scene played out, the roar of engines on a track, the feel of the wheel beneath her hands, the blur of the world as she pushed her car to its limit. She had competed against some of the best drivers who didn't waste time with taunts because they let their skills do the talking. These bikers were nothing more than noise in comparison. One of them knocked on her window with the back of his knuckles, the sharp sound cutting through the quiet. Hey! We're talking to you. Emily slowly rolled the window down, the faint whir of the mechanism the only sound for a moment. Her face remained neutral, but there was an unmistakable confidence in her posture. Yes, she asked, her tone polite but clipped. You sure you can handle this thing? The wiry biker sneered, gesturing toward her car. Doesn't look like it's seen much action. Emily tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. It's handled plenty, she said simply. Her response seemed to amuse them. The stocky biker chuckled, crossing his arms over his broad chest. Plenty, huh? Like grocery runs and Sunday drives. The others joined in his laughter, their voices echoing in the stillness of the night. But the leader didn't laugh. His smirk faltered for a moment as he studied her, his eyes narrowing. Something tells me you're not as ordinary as you seem, he said, his tone quieter now, almost thoughtful. Emily's smile widened just enough to be noticeable, but she didn't respond. She knew better than to play all her cards at once. Instead, she shifted her attention to the road ahead. The stretch of asphalt was long and empty, the perfect canvas for what she knew was coming. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and charged, like the moment before a storm. You know what I think, the leader continued, stepping back to admire her car. I think you've got something to prove. Why else would you be out here, all alone, in a car like this? Emily finally turned to look at him, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Maybe I'm not the one with something to prove, she said evenly. The leader blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her response. The others shifted uncomfortably, their confidence wavering. But the moment didn't last. The leader straightened, his smirk returning. All right, then. Let's settle it, he said, gesturing toward the open road. You and us. A little friendly competition. Unless, of course, you're not up for it. Emily's gaze flickered to the road, then back to him. She let the silence stretch, the weight of her decision hanging in the air. She could feel the adrenaline starting to build, a familiar rush that she hadn't felt in far too long. Fine, she said finally, her voice steady. Let's go. The bikers exchanged triumphant grins, their bravado returning in full force. They mounted their bikes, the engines roaring to life and shattering the quiet. Emily, meanwhile, took her time. She adjusted her seat belt, checked her mirrors, and placed her hands on the wheel. To an outsider, her movements might have seemed routine, almost mundane. But for her, this was a ritual, a moment to center herself before the chaos began. As the bikers revved their engines, taunting her with the growl of their machines, Emily's mind was already several steps ahead. She was calculating the angles, the speeds, the optimal line through each turn. This wasn't just a race to her, it was a test of precision, strategy, and control. The leader pulled up beside her window, his grin widening as he signaled for the others to line up. Ready when you are, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she revved her engine, the sound cutting through the night like a war cry. The leader raised his hand, holding it aloft for a moment before dropping it in a swift motion. The race was on. The instant the leader's hand dropped, the bikers surged forward, their motorcycles roaring as they shot down the open road. The air filled with the acrid scent of burning rubber and the high-pitched whine of engines pushed to their limits. Emily, however, didn't slam her foot on the gas. Not yet. She let them pull ahead, their laughter and shouts of triumph echoing in her ears. They were overconfident, cocky, and entirely unaware of what they'd just triggered. Her car idled for a split second longer before she eased onto the gas pedal, the engine's growl deep and guttural. It wasn't a sound designed to boast, it was a sound designed to warn. Emily's hands were steady on the wheel as she shifted gears, the car surging forward with a power that felt almost alive. The asphalt blurred beneath her as she gained speed, the wind whipping past the edges of the car like a chorus of whispers urging her on. The bikers, still ahead, glanced over their shoulders to check her position. One of them laughed, raising a fist in mock celebration. But their leader didn't share their confidence. His eyes narrowed as he caught sight of her headlights growing brighter behind them. "Is she catching up?" the stocky biker shouted over the noise of the engines. "She's just bluffing," another shot back. "No way, that car's got the power." But Emily wasn't bluffing. She leaned into the curve of the road, her car responding with a precision that spoke of years of practice and countless hours spent fine-tuning every component. This wasn't just about speed, it was about control. And Emily had control in spades. As the road straightened, she pressed harder on the gas, her car leaping forward like a predator closing in on its prey. The bikers were no longer dots on the horizon, they were right in front of her, their bikes struggling to maintain their lead. "Is she drafting us?" the wiry biker yelled, glancing nervously behind him. "Doesn't matter," the leader barked back. "Stay focused." But focus wasn't their strong suit. Not when they were facing someone like Emily. She slipped into their slipstream, the aerodynamic pocket behind the bikes giving her an extra boost as she prepared to make her move. Her car's engine roared with a fierce determination, drowning out the biker's shouts as she swerved to the side, ready to overtake. The leader glanced over, his jaw tightening as he realized what was happening. "No way," he muttered under his breath, his hands gripping the handlebars tighter. Emily didn't give him time to react. She shifted gears once more, her car lunging forward with a burst of speed that left the bikers scrambling to keep up. The stocky biker let out a frustrated shout as she passed him, his bike wobbling slightly in her wake. "What the," he began, but his words were lost in the roar of her engine. The wiry biker was next, his confidence crumbling as Emily's car shot past him like a silver bullet. He swerved slightly, trying to block her path, but she anticipated the move, cutting around him with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Now it was just her and the leader. He was no amateur, Emily could tell by the way he adjusted his position, leaning into his bike to reduce drag as he pushed the machine to its limits. But no amount of skill could make up for the sheer power of her car or the years of experience she carried with her. She inched closer, the gap between them shrinking with every second. The road ahead was straight and clear, the perfect stage for what came next. The leader glanced back, his face a mix of determination and disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. Emily's lips curved into a faint smile as she pulled alongside him, their vehicles neck and neck. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that instant, he saw her for what she truly was, not just another driver, but a force to be reckoned with. And then she was gone. Her car surged ahead, the engine's roar fading into the distance as she left the bikers behind. The leader let out a frustrated growl, his bike straining to keep up, but it was no use. Emily had already won. The road stretched out before her, empty and open, as she slowed down, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Behind her, the bikers struggled to regain their composure, their overconfidence now replaced by a stunned silence. The leader finally pulled up beside her as she came to a stop at the next intersection. His face was flushed, his breathing heavy, but there was a hint of respect in his eyes. You're good," he admitted, his voice begrudging. Emily rolled down her window, her expression calm but unyielding. "I know," she replied simply. With that, she drove off, leaving the bikers to grapple with the reality of their defeat. The lead biker's cocky grin widened as he heard Emily's calm response. He didn't see her calm as confidence, he mistook it for fear cloaked in bravado. "All right, sweetheart," he said with a sneer, "lead the way. Let's see what you got." Emily didn't bother with further conversation. She flicked her wrist, signaling them to follow as she eased her car forward. The sleek silver vehicle moved with an elegance that seemed out of place next to the raw, rumbling bikes. The bikers chuckled among themselves, revving their engines in anticipation. "Bet she doesn't even hit 70, one of them jeered. "Doesn't matter," said another, "we'll make it quick." Emily's eyes stayed locked on the road ahead as she drove out of the gas station and onto the empty stretch of highway. The night was still, the moon casting a silver sheen over the pavement. The silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of engines, carried a tension that felt almost electric. The bikers lined up beside her, their engines roaring as they taunted her. "Whenever you're ready, princess," the leader called out. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a button on her dashboard. The faintest hum rippled through the air as the car shifted modes, the soft glow of the console intensifying. It was a subtle change, but to the trained eye, it was the beginning of something extraordinary. She took a deep breath, her hands steady on the wheel. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she toggled the car into launch control. A green light on her dashboard blinked twice, and the car tensed like a predator ready to pounce. She glanced sideways at the bikers, her expression unreadable. "Go," she said simply. Before the word had fully registered, Emily's car launched forward with a ferocity that left the bikers stunned. The roar of her engine cut through the night like a battle cry, the tires gripping the asphalt with precision as she surged ahead. "Holy," one biker began, but his voice was swallowed by the wind as Emily disappeared into the distance. The bikers scrambled to keep up, their bikes roaring as they pushed their limits. But it didn't matter. Emily's car was a masterpiece of engineering, every component fine-tuned for moments like this. She hit the first turn at a speed that should have been impossible, her tires skimming the edge of the road with surgical precision. Her hands moved instinctively, guiding the car through the curve with a grace that spoke of years of experience. Behind her, the bikers struggled to maintain their pace. One of them nearly lost control, his bike wobbling dangerously before he managed to steady it. "She's crazy," the wiry biker shouted over the roar of his engine. "No," the leader growled, his face a mask of frustration. "She knows exactly what she's doing." Emily's mind was laser-focused, her body in perfect harmony with the car. Each movement was calculated, every decision made in a fraction of a second. She wasn't just driving, she was performing, the road her stage and the car her instrument. The highway stretched on, a labyrinth of twists and turns that would have overwhelmed most drivers. But for Emily, it was familiar territory. She navigated the sharp corners with ease, her car responding to her touch like an extension of herself. The bikers, meanwhile, were falling apart. Their overconfidence had evaporated, replaced by a frantic desperation to catch up. "She's not just good," the stocky biker panted. She's insane." "No," the leader said again, his jaw tight. "She's a pro." As if to confirm his words, Emily executed a drift so precise it left the bikers speechless. Her car slid gracefully through the curve, the tires gripping the road with just enough force to maintain control. It was a move that required skill, timing, and an intimate knowledge of her vehicle's capabilities. And it was something none of them could replicate. By the time they reached the final stretch of highway, Emily was so far ahead she was barely a speck in the distance. The bikers pushed their bikes harder, their engines screaming in protest, but it was no use. Emily slowed as she approached the gas station, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She parked her car neatly by the pump, stepping out with the same calm demeanor she'd had before the race began. One by one, the bikers rolled in behind her, their bikes sputtering and their faces etched with exhaustion and disbelief. The leader dismounted first, his expression a mixture of frustration and reluctant admiration. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Emily didn't answer immediately. She walked to the front of her car, running a hand along the hood as if to calm the beast within. Then she turned to face him, her gaze steady. "I'm Emily Stanton," she said simply. "And I've been doing this longer than you've been riding." The leader's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. There was no point. She'd proven herself in a way words never could. The wiry biker, still catching his breath, muttered, "She's not just good. She's legendary." Emily allowed herself a small smile. She didn't need their validation, but it was satisfying nonetheless. The leader nodded slowly, his earlier bravado replaced by a grudging respect. "All right, Stanton. You win. Fair and square." Emily didn't respond. She climbed back into her car, the engine purring softly as she started it up. As she drove away, the bikers watched in silence, their pride bruised but their respect earned. And as the silver car disappeared into the night, one thing was clear: Emily Stanton wasn't just a driver. She was a force to be reckoned with, a master of her craft, unyielding and unstoppable. The bikers remained silent as Emily's tail lights disappeared into the darkness, her engine's faint hum fading into the stillness of the night. For a moment, none of them moved. They exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier arrogance shattered. "That wasn't just skill," the stocky biker finally muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "That was something else." The leader, still holding his helmet under one arm, clenched his jaw. His pride stung, but he couldn't deny the truth. "She's more than we thought," he admitted, his tone grim. "Way more." Unbeknownst to them, Emily hadn't gone far. She pulled her car to a stop a few miles down the road, her pulse still racing. She leaned back in her seat, letting the adrenaline settle, her thoughts swirling with the events of the night. She hadn't planned to reveal her skill, not here, not to them. But something about the bikers' dismissive arrogance had stirred an old fire in her. They reminded her of all the people who doubted her over the years, the ones who thought she didn't belong in a world dominated by speed, power, and competition. Her phone buzzed on the dashboard, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, the name on the caller ID making her lips curve into a faint smile. "Still chasing the horizon, Em," the familiar voice teased when she answered. "You know me," she replied, her tone lighter now. "Well, keep your eyes open." Words spreading about a driver with skills that make people talk. "Thought you might want to know." Emily chuckled softly. "Thanks for the heads up, but I think I'm already making headlines." The call ended, and Emily set her phone down. She looked out at the empty road stretching ahead, a quiet determination settling over her. She hadn't asked for the attention, but she wasn't going to shy away from it either. Meanwhile, back at the gas station, the bikers regrouped. The leader paced in agitation, his boots scuffing against the pavement. "We need to find out who she is," he said, his voice low but firm. "What's the point?" the wiry biker asked, slumping against his bike. "She smoked us. End of story." "No," the leader snapped. "It's not just about tonight. She's something else, someone else. And I want to know why she's out here, driving like that, in the middle of nowhere." The stocky biker frowned. "You think she's one of them?" The leader didn't answer immediately. His mind was already racing, piecing together fragments of rumors and whispers he'd heard over the years. Stories about a driver who could outmaneuver anyone, who didn't just race for the thrill but for something more, something deeper. "We'll find out," he said finally, his voice laced with determination. Far ahead on the highway, Emily had resumed her drive. The road stretched out before her, endless and inviting. But she knew this wasn't the end. The bikers wouldn't let this go, and part of her welcomed the challenge. As she drove, memories surfaced of races won and lost, of nights spent fine-tuning her car, of the sacrifices she'd made to pursue her passion. She wasn't just a driver, she was a fighter, someone who had carved out her place in a world that had tried to push her aside. The bikers weren't her first challengers, and they wouldn't be her last. But they had reignited something in her, a reminder of why she'd started this journey in the first place. Hours later, as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Emily pulled into a small roadside diner. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the smell of fresh coffee wafted through the air as she stepped inside. The waitress greeted her with a warm smile, handing her a menu. Emily chose a booth by the window, her car visible just outside. As she sipped her coffee, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. The bikers might have been a fleeting encounter, but their reactions had reminded her of an important truth: she was more than they could comprehend. And no matter who came next, she was ready. Emily stepped out of the car as the bikers arrived moments later, their engines sputtering to a halt. Their faces bore the unmistakable marks of defeat: flushed cheeks, wide eyes, and mouth slightly agape. It was clear they were still trying to process what had just happened. The leader, usually full of bravado, dismounted his bike with none of the swagger he'd displayed earlier. He hesitated, then blurted, What are you?" Emily leaned casually against her car, crossing her arms and letting the silence hang for a moment. She wanted them to feel it, the weight of their own underestimation. "Emily Stanton," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Professional racing driver." The words landed like a hammer. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier arrogance replaced by sheepish embarrassment. They had mocked her, challenged her, and now stood in the aftermath of their misplaced confidence. "You're joking," the wiry biker muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Emily's gaze locked onto his. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The leader cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. "All right, you're fast. We get it. But why waste your time out here with us?" Emily's expression softened slightly, though her stance remained resolute. "Because people like you need reminders," she said. "Reminders that skill, respect, and discipline matter more than arrogance. And because you didn't leave me much choice." The stocky biker shifted uncomfortably, his eyes dropping to the ground. "We didn't mean. I mean, we didn't know." "Exactly," Emily interrupted, her tone sharp but not unkind. "You didn't know. But that didn't stop you from judging me, did it? From trying to belittle me for how I look or what I drive?" The leader opened his mouth to respond but thought better of it. The truth of her words was undeniable, and he knew it. Emily pushed off the car, standing tall. "Here's some advice," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned her place in the world. "Next time you see someone who doesn't fit your idea of competition, think twice before opening your mouth. Respect goes a long way." The bikers nodded mutely, their earlier bravado completely deflated. But Emily wasn't finished. She reached into her car and pulled out a small notebook, flipping to an empty page. With a quick flourish, she wrote down a name and a number, then handed it to the leader. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "An entry to a local amateur circuit race," Emily replied. "If you're serious about racing and not just about showing off, put your skills to the test where it matters. Learn what it means to earn respect on the track. Until then, stay out of my way." The leader stared at the paper, his expression shifting from confusion to something resembling respect. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket. Emily stepped back into her car, her movements smooth and deliberate. The engine purred to life, its sound a reminder of the power she wielded so effortlessly. Before she drove off, she glanced at the bikers one last time. "Remember," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable edge. "Respect is earned, not taken. Make sure you earn it next time." With that, she shifted into gear and pulled out of the station, her tail lights glowing like embers in the night. The bikers stood in silence, watching her car disappear down the road. The stocky one finally broke the quiet. "She's something else." The leader nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the fading lights. "Yeah. And we've got a lot to learn." Underscore 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 on. Emily's journey continued, the horizon stretching endlessly before her. She didn't dwell on the encounter, it was just another reminder of the lessons she had learned the hard way. Strength wasn't about how loud you were or how flashy your vehicle looked. It was about control, patience, and knowing when to strike. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Emily smiled to herself. The road called to her, and she was ready to answer, 1 mile at a time. The bikers lingered in the empty station lot, their earlier bravado now a distant memory. They shuffled awkwardly, their helmets tucked under their arms as if they no longer belonged to them. The stocky one kicked at a loose pebble on the asphalt, the sound echoing in the quiet. "Think she was serious about that race," he muttered, breaking the silence. The leader, still clutching the folded paper Emily had given him, nodded. "She didn't strike me as someone who says things she doesn't mean." The wiry biker shook his head in disbelief. "I thought we'd scare her off, not, whatever that was." "She wasn't scared," the leader said quietly, almost to himself. "Not even for a second." The group fell silent again, their earlier laughter and taunts replaced by a heavy sense of introspection. For the first time, they realized they weren't the ones in control of the situation, and perhaps they never had been. Meanwhile, Emily drove on, the events of the night already fading into the rearview mirror. For her, it wasn't about proving something to them. She had nothing to prove, not to a group of cocky bikers or anyone else. But she couldn't deny the satisfaction that came from watching their arrogance crumble. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reminding them, and herself, of the principles she lived by. The road ahead stretched out endlessly, bathed in the soft glow of approaching dawn. Emily's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, her posture relaxed but alert. The hum of the engine was a comforting sound, a reminder of the countless hours she had spent perfecting her craft. But even as she drove, she couldn't help but think about the bikers. She had been in their shoes once, young, overconfident, and reckless. Back then, she had learned her lessons the hard way, on tracks where mistakes were costly and respect wasn't given freely. It had taken years of discipline and countless losses to shape her into the driver she was today. She hoped they would take her advice to heart. The paper she had given them wasn't just a challenge, it was an opportunity. She knew the amateur circuit well, it was where she had started, and where she had learned that racing wasn't about ego or flash. It was about precision, control, and the thrill of pushing yourself to the limit. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The night had been unexpected, but it had reminded her of why she loved the road. It wasn't just about the speed or the competition. It was about the journey, the lessons learned, the obstacles overcome, and the moments of quiet triumph that made it all worthwhile. Back at the gas station, the bikers had finally gathered the courage to speak. "So, are we really doing this?" the stocky one asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The leader unfolded the paper, staring at the neat handwriting that listed the time and place of the next amateur circuit race. He glanced at his bike, then at his friends. "Yeah," he said finally. "We are. If she can do it, so can we. But we're going to have to work for it." The wiry biker groaned. "Work? Can't we just show up and race?" "No," the leader snapped, his tone unusually serious. "If there's one thing tonight taught me, it's that we don't know half as much as we think we do. If we want to race for real, we need to learn. And we need to do it right." The stocky biker nodded slowly, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. "All right. Let's do it. No more messing around." The wiry biker sighed but eventually nodded as well. "Fine. But if I end up looking like an idiot, it's on you." The leader smirked, a hint of his old confidence returning. "Trust me, we're all going to look like idiots. But that's the point. You don't get better by staying comfortable." The group mounted their bikes, the engines rumbling to life once more. But this time, there was no arrogance in their movements, only a quiet resolve. As they rode off into the distance, the paper tucked safely in the leader's pocket, they carried with them a new sense of purpose. Emily's lesson had done more than humble them, it had given them a reason to change. And for her, that was victory enough. The road stretched on, endless and inviting. Emily smiled to herself as she disappeared into the horizon, the thrill of the journey calling her forward. In life, there are moments when the most profound lessons come from the simplest experiences. Think about it, how often do we overlook the quiet, unassuming paths in favor of those that are loud and obvious? We chase what's shiny, what's loud, or what promises recognition. Yet, the quietest roads, the ones we almost miss, are often the ones that leave the deepest impact. That night, Emily wasn't seeking validation or attention. She didn't have a crowd to impress or a trophy to win. In fact, she wasn't looking for anything outside herself. What made her different wasn't her need to prove something to others, it was her deep understanding that sometimes, it's enough to simply show up and do your best. Emily's journey was about more than the destination. It wasn't just about getting from one point to another, it was about the quiet strength she carried inside. Strength like hers doesn't announce itself with fanfare or grand speeches. It doesn't demand applause. Instead, it reveals itself in the small, steady steps we take when no one else is watching. The world often rewards loudness. It celebrates big displays of talent, flashy achievements, and bold declarations. But what about those moments that happen in the quiet? What about the triumphs that no one sees, the battles we fight alone, the challenges we overcome without an audience, and the quiet victories that transform us? That night, Emily reminded the world of a simple truth: strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers. And when it does, it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention. But those who truly see, who take the time to notice, understand that quiet strength is the most powerful kind. It's not about being the loudest in the room, it's about being the most grounded, the most determined, the most true to yourself. Emily's story teaches us that being underestimated is not a setback, it's an opportunity. When others doubt you, when they fail to see your potential, they're giving you a gift. It's a chance to rise quietly, to build your strength without the pressure of expectations, and to let your actions speak louder than words ever could. Think about the moments in your own life when someone doubted you. Maybe it was a teacher who thought you wouldn't succeed, a boss who overlooked your abilities, or even a friend who underestimated your resilience. How did you respond? Did you let their doubts define you, or did you use them as fuel to prove them wrong, not out of spite, but out of a deeper desire to stay true to yourself? Emily's actions that night weren't about revenge or proving a point to others. They were about proving something to herself. She knew her worth, even when others didn't. She knew her capabilities, even when others dismissed them. And she understood that true strength isn't about shouting your achievements from the rooftops, it's about quietly doing the work and letting the results speak for themselves. The world often underestimates those who don't fit the mold. It overlooks the quiet dreamers, the hard workers who don't seek attention, and the individuals who march to the beat of their own drum. But history has shown us time and time again that these are the people who change the world. Emily's story is a reminder to all of us: don't be afraid to walk your own path, even if it's the quieter one. Don't be discouraged by those who doubt you. Instead, let their doubt remind you of your own strength. Let it push you to dig deeper, to work harder, and to stay true to your purpose. In the end, life isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about knowing who you are and standing firmly in that truth, no matter what the world says. It's about finding strength in the quiet moments, in the unseen victories, and in the unwavering belief that you are capable of greatness. So, the next time you find yourself on a quiet road, remember Emily's story. Remember that strength doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Remember that the quietest roads often lead to the loudest lessons. And most importantly, remember that being underestimated is not a limitation, it's an opportunity to shine in ways no one saw coming. Because, in the end, it's not about the noise you make, it's about the impact you leave behind. And as Emily showed us, sometimes the most profound impact comes from simply staying true to who you are, walking your path with quiet confidence, and reminding the world that underestimating someone is the surest way to be proven wrong. The next time someone doubts you, don't fight to prove them wrong with words. Instead, let your actions do the talking. Take that quiet road, and walk it with purpose. Because one day, when the dust has settled, they'll look back and realize that you weren't just walking, you were paving the way. So, here's to the quiet roads, the underestimated souls, and the loud lessons they teach us. Keep walking, keep believing, and never let anyone's doubt dim your light. After all, the quietest strength is often the most unstoppable. Life often feels like a race. From the moment we're old enough to understand goals and expectations, we're taught to strive to achieve, to win, to stand out. But in this constant push for recognition, how often do we pause to consider the value of quiet perseverance? Emily's story is one of those rare reminders that life's greatest victories don't always come with applause. Sometimes, they're the moments that happen when no one is looking. It's in these quiet spaces that true strength grows like seeds planted beneath the soil, unseen yet undeniably alive. We live in a world that prizes visibility. Social media, for example, has created a culture where every success, every milestone, and every accomplishment is broadcast for the world to see. It's easy to get caught up in this cycle, feeling as though achievements only matter if they're recognized by others. But Emily's journey teaches us a different lesson: recognition is fleeting, but self-belief is eternal. That night, Emily wasn't chasing anyone's approval. She wasn't trying to prove herself to the world. In fact, she wasn't trying to prove anything at all. She simply showed up, did the work, and let the results speak for themselves. And isn't that what true strength looks like? It's not about shouting your accomplishments from the rooftops, it's about carrying yourself with quiet confidence, knowing your worth even when no one else does. There's a certain power in being underestimated. When people don't expect much from you, they're not watching closely. They don't see the effort, the preparation, and the resilience that you pour into your journey. And because they're not paying attention, you're free to grow without the weight of their expectations. Emily understood this. She knew that being underestimated wasn't a setback, it was a gift. It gave her the freedom to focus on what truly mattered: her own growth, her own journey, and her own inner strength. And when the moment came to shine, she didn't need to announce it. Her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. But let's step back for a moment and think about why we underestimate people in the first place. Is it because they're quiet? Because they don't fit our expectations? Or is it because, deep down, we fear what we don't understand? Society has a habit of putting people into boxes. We label them based on their appearance, their background, or their behavior. And when someone doesn't fit neatly into one of these boxes, we often dismiss them. But Emily's story challenges us to rethink this approach. It reminds us that every person is capable of greatness, regardless of how they present themselves to the world. Think about the times in your own life when you felt underestimated. Maybe it was a moment in school when a teacher doubted your potential. Or perhaps it was at work, when your efforts went unnoticed, and someone else got the recognition you deserved. How did those moments make you feel? Did they push you to work harder, or did they make you question your worth? For many of us, being underestimated can feel like a burden. It's easy to internalize other people's doubts, to let their skepticism shape how we see ourselves. But Emily's story shows us another way. Instead of letting others' doubts define her, she used them as motivation. She understood that her worth wasn't determined by what others thought of her, it was determined by what she believed about herself. This is a lesson we can all carry with us. The next time someone underestimates you, remember Emily's quiet confidence. Remember that your worth isn't tied to their expectations. And most importantly, remember that being underestimated is an opportunity, not a limitation. When we're underestimated, we have the chance to surprise people. We have the chance to show them that strength doesn't always look the way they expect it to. And in doing so, we not only prove them wrong, we also inspire them to see the world differently. Emily's journey is a testament to the power of resilience. It's a reminder that strength isn't about being the loudest or the fastest, it's about being steady, determined, and true to yourself. And it's a lesson we can all take to heart, no matter where we are on our own journeys. As we reflect on her story, let's consider the quiet roads in our own lives. What paths have we avoided because they seemed too uncertain, too quiet, or too lonely? And what lessons might we have missed by not taking those roads? Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. The quiet roads we hesitate to take often lead to the most profound discoveries. They teach us about ourselves, about our strength, and about what truly matters. And they remind us that success isn't about how loudly we announce our achievements, it's about the impact we leave behind. So, as you move forward in your own journey, don't be afraid to take the quiet road. Don't be afraid to embrace the moments when no one is watching, and no one is cheering. Because those are the moments that shape who you are. Emily's story is more than just a tale of triumph, it's a call to action. It's a reminder to all of us to believe in ourselves, even when others don't. To keep going, even when the road is uncertain. And to never underestimate the power of quiet strength. In the end, life isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about staying true to who you are, no matter what the world says. And it's about finding the courage to walk the quiet roads, knowing that the loudest lessons often come from the most unexpected places. So here's to the quiet roads, the underestimated souls, and the loud lessons they teach us. Keep walking, keep believing, and never let anyone's doubt dim your light. After all, the quietest strength is often the most unstoppable.